This guy, Bob Watson, was just a sophomore, and I know people who have met him. He's a liberal Democrat, always has been, but he's a pioneer. And he has blazed a trail to show us something that we didn't know, that none of us knew, and that is that, and according to parliamentary procedure, if you table something, or if it doesn't get enough votes, it remains on the table until it passes. Or it simply waits, but it never really dies. So the Founding Fathers presented, how many people know how many articles there are in the Bill of Rights?
10.
10, that's right. But did you know how many were in the original Bill of Rights? Well, most people can't tell me that. In fact, most people can't tell me 10, but 12, and 2 of those were not ratified. The original Second Amendment is the one that Greg Watson got ratified, and that leaves us with the original first. In 1789, George Washington stood up on the last day of the Constitutional Convention and said to the men assembled, he said, "Gentlemen," he had not addressed any issue for 2 years, only chaired the meetings, but he addressed this issue, and he said the most important amendment in this Bill of Rights is the first one, which would actually expand the size of the districts by population. If you look in your Constitution, it says in Article 2 and Section 2, I think, about the executive, I'm sorry, about Congress, it'd be Article 1, but it tells how many people can be in a district. Does anybody know? What does your Constitution say? 30,000. That's the constitutional standard to this day. It was messed with by Abraham Lincoln, it was messed with by Woodrow Wilson, and then in 1929, they passed the 1929 Reapportionment Act, which said there's not enough space in the Capitol building for more than 435 desks. Therefore, we will have 435 districts. Sort of a strange measure of logic, but that was their determination of why we will have 435 districts, regardless of the size. And that froze the districts to a number, but not to the size that they could be. If you know anything about parliamentary procedure, you know that you cannot amend the Constitution with a bill.
That's right.
But that's exactly what they did. It's an unconstitutional law. It is null and void as far as I'm concerned. And if they don't go back, if they don't ratify the original First Amendment, then they need to go back to the Constitution and have 30,000 people in every district. Does anyone know how many people in Oklahoma are in each of your congressional districts, your federal congressional districts?
So we're just under 3 million, and we have 5 U.S. representatives.
Okay, so 600 and some thousand. There is no way on earth that a representative, that a man or woman can represent constituents, 600,000 constituents. As a matter of fact, I don't think they represent any of them. I think they represent special interests more often than not. But in any event, this amendment was going to raise the number from 30,000 to 40,000, and then in time, when Congress got big enough, to 50,000, where it would be frozen forever. This should be a nonpartisan issue, because this means Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals, all would get more and better representation. Now, the first question that comes up, most of you are thinking, how many congressmen will we then have? The answer is 6,400. And I love the reaction after that. It's usually, goodness, oh my goodness, you know what? I don't want 6,000 congressmen. Yes, you do. Because they become answerable to you. Now, it does create a logistics problem, and that's the next question. Where are they going to meet? The Washington Stadium? Or where are you going to put them? It's really simple. We have prepared, and I say Tactical Civics, and has prepared a bill called the Bring Congress Home Act. Because as soon as that amendment is ratified by the requisite 38 states, the next thing that happens is you got all these senators who's going to be redistricting in every state. So the state legislatures will have the fun of giving you 48 representatives. I think it's 48 in Oklahoma. You'll be doing redistricting. And instead of the federal congressman bullying your state senators and representatives, and saying either vote for that bill or I'll cut off your funding for your education, highways, military. The federal congressman, each district, each representative will have 2, 3, 4 congressmen in his district. And he'll be doing the redistricting. And they'll be coming to him and saying, oh, please don't draw the lines so that I wind up over there. And it creates a check and balance. The founding fathers, in their wisdom, gave us so many of these little checks and balances. So then these guys will face each other as equals. I do agree that there's another bill that needs to be passed, and that's to repeal the 17th Amendment. But that's out of the purview of this talk today. But if you did those two things, this country might be saved. Might be saved. I'm not an optimist, but it might be possible. I appreciate your prayer earlier, Dan, to say that we might be empowered, because this is an empowerment act. This is something that any state rep or state senator can stand up and say, Mr. Speaker, point of privilege. So that interrupts everything, point of privilege. I want to make a motion to ratify the original First Amendment. Here it is. And at that point, they have to vote on it. And it doesn't matter if it wins or loses the first time. The first guy that does that will be the first state representative in 229 years who has stood up and participated in the original Constitutional Convention of 1789. He will become a participant, and he'll be striking a spark which could literally blow up the power hold that Congress has on this country. Turn Congress upside down and right side out is the way I like to say it. This could really, I can tell you there are two groups that are going to really oppose this. One is the U.S. Congress, and one is all the lobbyists in this country. They're going to hate this because you're going to have to bring these guys home. The Bring Congress Home Act says that would have to be passed, and it would be mandatory. You could almost not do it any other way. Just tell them you can't have an office in D.C. anymore. You can have an office in your district. You get elected, you can go to D.C., take your oath, get your picture taken, shake hands, and come home. And that raises the next question. And look, we all know there's strip centers available with modest little buildings that there are malls that are not doing so well, and they can put their office there, close to their people, in their district. And then you and I can go and see these guys. And when the lobbyist tries to come and see one of these 6,000 congressmen around the country, he's going to walk in the office, and here's a mom with 4 homeschooled kids, and here's a farmer with a pitchfork, and here's you and me sitting there saying, what do you want? You know, I mean, and the congressman will be seeing us in the grocery store. And he'll be seeing us everywhere he goes. He won't hide from us in Washington anymore. So I think it's got a lot of potential. It's an exciting proposal. And you may think, well, the Supreme Court would never allow this. This is what Greg Watson did for us. Someone sued in his effort to get it ratified way back in the original Second Amendment. And the Supreme Court said, we have no jurisdiction. This is the convening authority that created the Supreme Court. We, the Supreme Court, are an inferior court to the Constitutional Convention. We have no authority. So it's up to the states. And it's not simply up to the states. It's up to the state legislatures. The governor can't veto it. It's simply a matter of up or down vote in both houses in each state. So what an opportunity to just ram something through that they don't even see coming. And once one state passes, when the 12th state ratifies, 11 states ratified in 1790. It needed 12. And why didn't it get passed? Because there was a clerical error, a typo in effect. The guy wrote the wrong word in it from the original. So all these guys ratified the wrong wording, and then at the 12th one, they said, wait. So even though the state of, I think it was Connecticut, had ratified, they decided not to forward it to Congress, and so it just sat there. Technically, it's been ratified, but the notification hasn't passed. And so that word is still there. We can't go back and change that. We have to start over. So leaving it there, it does not matter. The intent is clear. And everybody knew what it meant, and everybody knows what it means. So we're going to bear with that one clerical error. I'll let you read about it. You can read about it online, but the bottom line here is that if one state ratifies, then we have 12. We're looking for the 12th state. And I noticed the pattern that went on with Greg Watson. 1982, he starts writing letters with a little electric portable typewriter. You guys recognize that. No, there were no computers. And in 1983, the state of Maine ratified. Amazing. Just like that. There was no mass movement of millions of people and billions of dollars. It was just one kid, one college student writing letters. So I'm hoping that your state legislators will hear from you in the next 30 days and that they'll pay attention. We need somebody to stand up and strike the spark. I hope there'll be a Democrat and a Republican in Maine, and probably several. I don't want to see this as a partisan issue. This is a power to the people, if you pardon my language. That sounds so Democratic Party, but it's very true. And that's really my presentation. Now, I'll take questions because I probably haven't answered everything.
On your new reapportionment for 6,000 representatives, has anybody done a breakdown on population centers? You got New York, LA, the Bay Area, Seattle. They're going to get most of the new representatives.
Of course. Just
So
like they have
we're
now.
going to have maybe 5,000 liberal Democrat representatives and 1,000 conservative Republican representatives.
There are conservative centers in the cities as well, but there are 31,000 communities and counties that have never had a single representative. All of a sudden, Coffeyville, Kansas is going to have their own representative. And the places way out in the middle of nowhere will have representatives. And you're right, the proportion is always going to be 10 to the high population centers and to the large states, to New York, to Texas, to California. But that doesn't change, really, it doesn't change anything. I think you'll see a more conservative flavor, but number-wise, those will be up to each individual state legislature. Well, you're shaking your head, so.
I don't see how you're saying that it won't make any difference. You have a majority of liberal communists in our legislature. They're going to, everything's going to be free love and nickel beer.
Very well.
I wanted to try to help Paul understand that there.
Okay, so Steve, I'll get to you.
I'll always wait on Charlie.
The way it is right now, it's based on population, Paul. So California has 54 or 52 U.S. representatives right now. So they will have more than any other state, you're absolutely right. But it doesn't change basically the numbers that exist there now. And you will have several conservative Republicans coming out of California. There'll be some pockets of them coming out of California.
Absolutely.
There could be in Oklahoma, where Oklahoma County is changing so rapidly, you could have, out of 50 coming from Oklahoma, you could have 5 or 6 Democrats, radical Democrats here. And there might be a couple other places like Norman would be radical Democrats too. But you would have places like Enid, which is 50,000. Enid would have its own representative, and other places would have theirs, and they tend to be conservative. So this doesn't change that proportional thing. That proportional thing already exists today. So
Actually, we kind of have an example of this already, and how it works is, you all know, New Hampshire is the one state without a state income tax or state sales tax. 435 representatives in a small state. In fact, having dealt with them, I think every third person is an elected. But you see what Charlie's talking about there. Things splinter so much, to move anything on the floor is really tough. So one that's worried about, Paul, if you're worried about a takeover by the liberals, I think you find that the liberals don't agree on everything. And in New Hampshire, if you ever get a chance to sit on the floor of the House and listen to them in New Hampshire, I think it gives you a little bit of insight into what I think we gain with this sort of representation.
My question, Daniel, is you said only 12 states would need to ratify it.
No, in 1790, it needed 12.
Okay, so
Today we need 38.
Okay, because I was going to say, because we've changed the number of
Yeah.
states now.
We need 27 more.
Okay,
one concern I would have is, in thinking of the terms the way it's done now, you would have so many more congressmen at their high salary, and you would have so many more bureaucrats serving in their office. However, I'm guessing you would have some kind of a plan to maybe limit, why does a congressman need a huge salary if he doesn't have to maintain a home here and one in Washington?
Thank you. Exactly.
And then another question I have is, would you limit his staff to maybe 4 or something to that nature? give him a small
I
budget
think, I
for
think
an
the budget
office.
is what's gonna limit his staff. The number, look, we can do the numbers based upon the existing budget, but we can't predict what Congress or what the states will do later to expand the budget. So working with the existing budget, the way they've done the numbers is every congressman could keep his current salary. That's amazing.
Wow.
And could have a secretary and a legislative aide, 2 full-time people in a modest office here in Evan, Oklahoma. But if he wants more, like if he needs 4 or 6 people, that's fine. But he doesn't need the 15 or 20 people in Washington who are busy running back and forth, conjuring up bills and then presenting them to him to sign. And he doesn't even know what he signed. Most of these bills are written by the lobbyists. There are a few that are not. Those are the real high-profile, popular things that they're doing, like the wall and stuff like that. But most of the legislation that's passed is written by Bayer and Monsanto and Geigy and
Yeah.
other companies who
Yeah.
pass these. They write the bills, bring them to the legislative aide. The legislative aide runs over it. He may spot something. He presents it to the congressman. The congressman says, "What does it say?" I don't have time to read all that. And so
Now,
you eliminate all of
vote
that.
using technology from right here.
The technology is in place now that they can caucus, they can debate, they can go to meeting, they can have, and they can vote all from their home here, and it can be secure technology. So they don't have to be in Washington.
So by blowing everything up out of Washington, ooh, I have to be careful my term here, don't I? By splintering everything out of Washington, you've diffused that centralized place of power
Yeah.
where the lobbyists live and have the access to them. You spread it out over everywhere, and we have more access.
So they don't have to pay for a home, they don't have to pay for the travel back and forth constantly, they don't have to pay for all the cocktail parties and the entertainment and the junkets that they take and the meetings and oh, it's incredibly lavish what goes on all day, every day.
If I could, one more thing.
Just the thought of this, right now, a House seat in Oklahoma is 38,000. Senate seats about 50,000, something to that nature. What that means in Oklahoma, those two seats, particularly the House seat, is small enough, the number of people that vote in those elections, that you can beat big money.
Yes.
You can knock the doors, you can walk, you can beat big money.
Walk that precinct, that district.
The state Senate seat is about the largest group that you can still do that on. You need more money, but you can walk enough doors in a Senate seat.
Sure, with a
You
good
get
team.
into a congressional seat, they don't walk doors. It's all about collecting money, it's all about either media or something to that
And
nature.
paying off special interests, that's right.
So this pulls much of the power out of the hands of big money and puts more of it into the grassroots and the people there.
I'm sorry.
Giving you a hard time, that is an excellent analysis.
So there are two different approaches on this. David Zuniga is the architect and engineer down in Boerne, Texas, who started doing research this one a couple of years ago, and he's written several books. And he's referenced there in that page. You can find his website, Tactical Civics. David and I don't agree upon how it should be gone about. I'd like to see the 12th state appear somewhere, anywhere, just like it did in 1983. David wants to get all 37 done at the same time, and I'm just saying, David, that's why you're an engineer.
Yeah.
You're not a politician, because you don't understand. You're not going to get homeschoolers and activists all to agree on this issue and go beat their state rep up in 37 states at once. It's not going to happen. So knowing that, I mean, I take that with a grain of salt. I still think David's a great guy and a great researcher and a brilliant man. He can articulate this. You should get him on the radio here. You should get him in conversations. You can bring him up. He'll testify. I like David Zuniga, and I like his vision. And when one state ratifies, then the cat's out of the bag. And other states immediately, whoa, the wind just shifted. And they smell that. And so they suddenly realize there's a movement in other states. So I anticipate it'll be Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, one of the states with only one rep. But your guys are the first place I've presented it, and so it could be Oklahoma. That would be exciting. Tom?
That's what I was going to ask you, Danny. You've traveled this country over the last 22 years and given speeches for Michael New's case. So you've traveled and been in a lot of different states. what are the handful of states that you think this is realistic to consider? I think you've mentioned to me before, but go ahead.
Well, the western states are more conservative. I don't see Virginia or New York or California, which is west, but still it's not. I don't think the large states will be interested at first. But when they start getting ratified by North Dakota, South Dakota, or Montana, Wyoming, Alaska, a good possibility, and Maine, because first of all, they have that history, and secondly, Maine's a very conservative state, in spite of their senators. So, any other questions?
Yeah, Charlie, I give Charlie a hard time, but I had not thought of that, the ability to elect a U.S. congressman without tens of millions of dollars.
Could do it for $30,000.
That is profound.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely profound. I'm curious to know, have you done the cost analysis on 6,000 deadbeat U.S. congressmen?
No, but David Zuniga has taken, as I mentioned earlier, the budget and shown what they could get, what they could have at the same existing budget. I don't think any of us would object to doubling the budget if we could bring them all home and control them. We might be able, probably would be able to reduce their salaries at the same time.
Yeah.
Significantly. No, I have not done that.
Yeah, I wonder,
There's a detail. We've got CPAs for that, don't we?
if we got this done and doubled the budget, we might significantly reduce our budgets in other
Now,
areas.
Lewis will,
I just did some rough math on that, and I think the budget was a little bit over $1 billion. But then when you factor in all the staff members and the offices and the travel and staff members and stuff like that, I think we're spending probably $600 million easy now on that. But it seems like Congressman Iztuk at one time proposed taking the number up to 600 and something, but he wasn't referring to this in the written Constitution here that says 30,000. So this has not been fettered at any court, but it does say, it says 30,000 right here, and that's,
Right.
this is a supreme law of the land. If that other is unconstitutional, then I would certainly help.
we either need to go back to the Constitution, or this is the liberal approach, pardon my French, to make it 50,000 instead of 30,000.
Since the federal representatives and senators represent a state, why are they federal employees? Why are not the states picking up the tab for these guys?
And that's a good question, and I cannot answer that to be honest.
You know, the feds, they get all the benefits in the world.
The 17th Amendment obviously took that away from the states, but I don't know where their salaries are set, probably by Congress. I don't know.
Well, but they're state employees.
You're right, they certainly ought to be. I don't think of course, the argument is that they represent the people, and back when the Senate was representing these states, you can certainly make a case for the states. It'd be nice to remember that. That would change everything. And, yes, sir.
I just wondered how big a hassle, or what would it look like to get a bill passed through this 6,500 member House then?
I hope it would take a long time. Those are very, very difficult. With 6,400 members, they can still caucus, they can still vote, there'll be pressure groups, there'll be, homeschool, there'll be writing and calling, but they'll be local. They'll have to listen to local because they gotta come out the door. You'll be sitting out there waiting for them in the parking lot. You're not letting the guy go home until he answers, why did you make that vote? And you're gonna read unelected guys. You're gonna have a lot more turnover, I think, once you have this.
So is this suggesting both the Senate and the House, just the House?
Just things.
And what would we do with the Senate?
That's next on the list. We can then turn our attention to the Senate, but there'll be enough turmoil for a decade right there. Therefore, I'm not worried about it. Our kids can worry about that.
Not so much a question, Dan Fisher. The question about the Senate, I think where we get a little bit mind-locked is we don't understand the original purpose of the Senate.
Right.
The Senate today is the House of Lords, but it's just another House of Representatives. It's just limited to two. But that's not what it was originally. Originally, they were to represent the state legislature. So they were to protect the state that they were from, their sovereignty. They were to go there and do the bidding of what the legislature told them to do because they were chosen by the legislature. So the legislature could recall them at any moment
and rebuke them, warn them, or replace them.
That's right.
Today, they answer to their constituents, and so they don't even care as long as they can raise the money to dupe the public with commercials. And so when we say the Senate, really the Senate is not the problem. I mean, it is a problem, understand, but that's because of the 17th Amendment.
Right.
If we just simply repeal the 17th Amendment,
Right.
that fixes, in my mind, most of the problem with the Senate.
Exactly.
So that fixes that, because now they're chosen to the state legislature, they answer to the state, and they're sent there to protect that state, not their constituents. See, and that's where people say, well, that's not representative. Yes, it is. We have a House of Representatives. That's right. Why did they have two houses? Because one of them was to represent the people directly, the other was to represent the state. And see, now we have two representing the people.
Democracy.
So we fouled it up completely.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna add one other thing to that, and that's that the state legislators, since they are elected by the people, there's a cross-through representation there as to what they elect for the US Senator.
Yep, that's right.
They're still accountable to the people
That's exactly
through the
right.
legislature, so it is still representative.
Oh, no, sure.
But no, I want a round of applause for that.
I would like to point out, though, before we go to the next question, that a great example of what you're talking about there, Dan, is that I asked Howard Phillips one time, who was the founder of the Constitution Party. I said, Howard, there's a lot of controversy right now about a fair tax or a flat tax. What do you favor? He said, I favor the founder's tax. What? The founder's tax. Well, I had never heard of the founder's tax, so I asked him to explain, and he said, well, look, bear in mind, the Senate was to represent the states, 2 senators, and then the House was to represent the people. The founders said, and he said it's in the Federalist Papers, I haven't read it, but I'm going to take his word for it right now, that if Congress overspent one year, if there's a deficit, they send a bill at the end of the fiscal year to the states to pay it all back. Because the states and the House and the people together passed that budget, so the states are going to have to pay it back. They send them a bill. Now, if the states don't want to pay that bill, what happens? The federal government will not spend another dime in that state until they do. That means no roads, no post roads, may mean no post office, no military, no federal funding, no federal courts will be provided for that state until they ante up the money. How long do you think it would take, he said, to balance the budget? No more than 1 year. And the states would all say to their senator, wait a minute, you guys voted for that budget? Come back home, your replacement is going to fix this. And that would be the end of it. And the power of the states, but the states have been emasculated. They have literally been castrated. They were a partner. In fact, they formed the original government, but knew enough, they were savvy enough to pull the people in and give them House of Representatives, so the people who were not literally there had representatives. But they were there on behalf of the state. And we can't have a republic until we return to that. Question over here, sir.
Yeah, my name's Jim. I was just thinking about the geographical confusion for the media and the lobbyists.
Praise the Lord. Now, there's going to be a lot of settling down. It'll be a lot of fun.
Unfortunately, mine's not a question, but it supports something that you were saying a while ago. I cannot remember the date. I have it in one of my presentations. But Thomas Jefferson was against Congress meeting in one location. And he made the comment that far removed from the people that they represent, they get away with all kinds of bad stuff.
You betcha.
Because they can hide by the distance. Yep. So he was early on spotting the very problem that we have today. So the concept of bringing them home is incredibly powerful.
Yes, it is.
Because as a state representative, and I'm sure Lewis could agree to this, you're right there amongst your people. And some of the districts are far more involved with their legislators than others are. But wow, what a
Are you
difference
telling
that
me?
makes.
Are you telling me, as a citizen, that state representatives hear from the people personally?
Yes.
Is that right? Do people run into you in the grocery store and badger you on?
Yes.
God bless them.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. So Jefferson was seeing this problem years and years ago, that if they congregated many miles away from the people they represent, they can do whatever they want.
In those days, they could have had it in a large church building. Today, they can't. Okay. I think we're pretty well done. If there's any other questions, Stephanie?